In this video, I'll be talking about what I think was the best championship team from every decade in the NBA starting from the 1950s, as that was when the league was officially established as the NBA. Share any ideas or let me know if you disagree in the comments, but keep in mind that this is my opinion. Without further ado, let's get into it. For the 1950s, I'm picking the 1959 Boston Celtics. This was the second championship of the Celtics dynasty. This team included 8 Hall of Famers and was led by the great Bill Russell, who was already averaging 17 and 23 a game. Bob Cousy was also probably the greatest passer in history up to that point, and other great players like Bill Sharman and Tom Heinsohn made this team truly great. This team went 52 and 20 and 8 and 3 in the playoffs to bring home their second of 11 championships. Crazy. The best team in the 60s was the 1967 Philadelphia 76ers. While it's definitely true that the Celtics were the best team for most of the decade, I think the 67 Sixers were just more dominant in this season, and they easily defeated the Celtics, who had pretty much the same team as their other best seasons. This Sixers team had Hall of Famers and was led by Wilt Chamberlain and Hal Greer. In my opinion, this was Wilt's best season too, as even though he wasn't averaging 50 like it was earlier, he had become much more of a team player and passer and had become way more efficient, upgrading his 50% shooting up to a ridiculous 68% while still averaging 24 points and 24 rebounds. This Sixers team went 68 and 13 and comfortably defeated all of their opponents in the playoffs, going 11 and 4, including a gentleman's sweep of the 60 and 21 Celtics on their way to the championship. For the 1970s, I'm going to pick the 72 LA Lakers. An argument can definitely be made for this 1971 Bucks, but I went with the Lakers for the depth. Even though the 3 biggest names were out of their primes, they were still very good, with Wilt averaging nearly 20 boards a game and still shooting 65% from the field. Even though Elgin Baylor was in his last season at age 37, he still put up decent stats of 12 and 6 a game. Jerry West and Hall of Famer Gail Goodrich each put up nearly 26 points per game, and this team went 69 and 13 in the regular season, including a 33-game win streak, before dominating the postseason, going 11 and 3 with a chip. Also, the 73 Celtics did go 68 and 14, but didn't even win the championship, as their lack of experience without Russell showed as they choked in the playoffs. Now moving on to the 1980s. This was actually a very tough decision between the 83 Sixers, the 86 Celtics, and the 87 Lakers. In the end, I went with the 1983 Sixers for their playoff dominance, as well as the fact that most of their key players were in their primes during the season. Both Moses Malone and Dr. J made the All-NBA first team, with Moses taking the regular season MVP. Hall of Famers Bobby Jones and Maurice Cheeks both made the All-Defensive first team, and Andrew Toney was also an All-Star this year. This squad went 65 and 17 and 12 and 1 in the playoffs, easily bringing home the championship, with Malone taking Finals MVP. Again, you can easily make an argument for both the 86 Celtics and 87 Lakers, but I just believe this team was more dominant. For the 1990s, I'm going with the 96 Bulls. The only real competition for the 96 Bulls were the 97 Bulls. However, while the team might have been slightly deeper, the 96 Bulls were more dominant and featured better versions of most of their key players. Despite their 4 best players not being in their prime, Jordan was still averaging 30 and won MVP, Pippen still was the all-around beast he normally was, and Rodman was still grabbing 15 boards a game. All 3 of these players made the All-Defensive first team, with Pippen and Jordan making the All-NBA first team. On the topic of defense, you can't forget the contribution Ron Harper made either, as another great perimeter defensive guard. And of course, you can't forget the 6th Man of the Year, Tony Kukoc, or Phil Jackson, one of the greatest coaches of all time. Combining all of this made the team both first in offense and defense, and they went 72 and 10 in the regular season and 15 and 3 in the playoffs, winning the ring to combine for the best win percentage of any team in league history. For the 2000s, I'm going with another obvious one, the 01 Lakers. The 01 Lakers had improved their lineup despite having just won 67 games in the championship. Prime Shaq averaging 29, 13, and 3 blocks and pretty much make any team great, but then you have to factor in the fact that they had a Kobe Bryant averaging 28 and great role players like Derek Fisher and Horace Grant. It was game over. Despite their somewhat comparatively mediocre 56 and 26 record in the regular season, in the playoffs when it mattered most, they all came together to pull off one of the most dominant runs in NBA playoff history, going 15 and 1, only losing 1 game to a historic performance from Allen Iverson. They weren't facing weak opponents either on their way to the finals. They swept the 50-win Blazers team, they swept the 55-win Kings team, and then they swept the 58-win Spurs, who were building their dynasty, all on the way to the finals before gentlemen sweeping the 56-win 76ers. The biggest competition for this team was probably one of the championship Spurs teams, but I just don't think they were as dominant to beat a 1 Lakers team. The best team in the 2010s was the 2017 Golden State Warriors. This team is a very hateable team, but you just can't deny how dominant they were. The 2016 Warriors already won 73 games in the regular season, but then you add a top 5 player in the league to them. That just made the NBA unfair. 4 players on this team made the All-Star game, and Clay, Curry, and KD all averaged over 22 a game, while Draymond was still one of the best defensive anchors in the league. They won 67 games in the regular season and nearly swept the whole playoffs, only losing 1 game in the finals. It is worth mentioning that the Spurs did have a 30-point lead on them in Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals before Kawhi got injured, but I still think the Warriors would have put them away in 6 without the injury. Their biggest competition was probably the 2014 Spurs, as they played arguably the best team basketball ever, but I just don't think they have enough talent to match this Warriors super team. Lastly, the 2020s. We're only 4 seasons into this decade, so a new team could very well pass up the current team I have, but I'm just going off of what we've seen so far. This was another pretty tough choice, but I ended up going with the 2023 Nuggets. Nikola Jokic has shown he's one of the greatest offensive players in NBA history, and pairing the efficient triple-double machine with a borderline all-star in Jamal Murray and great role players like Aaron Gordon and Bruce Brown made this team great. Their 53-29 regular season was good, yet was the worst record on this entire list I have. However, what made this team truly special was that Jokic and Murray, as well as many of the role players, clearly rose their game to another level in the playoffs, especially with Jokic breaking numerous records, leading his team to a 16-4 record on their way to the chip. That wraps up today's video. Once again, share any ideas or disagreements you have in the comments, and make sure to like and sub if you enjoyed. Thanks for all the support, guys.